Hello, everyone. We're going to give people a minute or two to join. If you have any questions throughout this session, please feel free to add them to the chat, making sure you are sending the question to everyone and not just hosts and panelists. We'll be able to have a bit of a Q&A towards the end. Now, as we wait, add where you're calling from in the chat. I'm calling from Montreal today. We're actually having nice weather. We have a note taker. Any humans? Charleston, amazing. Indiana, Tampa, awesome. Houston, Phoenix, Detroit, amazing. Alberta, Regina, Toronto, Vancouver, Minneapolis, awesome. Great, great, great. From hot Greece, loving it. Good weather, amazing. Alrighty, so welcome to today's Tiger Hall webinar. Our session features Blake Bell, Head of Global Change Enablement at Manulife John Hancock, and today's topic is Decentralizing Transformation at Scale. Blake, you can take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Super excited to be able to share what we're doing here at Manulife John Hancock. But also, we wanted to reserve some time at the end for questions and comments because we'd love to hear what you all are doing out in your world. So, again, my name Blake Bell, head of Manulife's Global Change Enablement Center of Excellence. And I've been with Manulife as of August 8th for 4 years now. Came over from the Royal Bank of Canada, where I spent 10 years. Prior to that, I was in customer service with Rogers way back in my youth, but took a hard pivot into communications in 2007, doing some work in a provincial government agency. And that then led me to the notion of once I got into RBC and working in the IT division, I started to see us building the best widgets that anyone would want to be able to build, but they often fell flat with the intended end users. And I was super curious as to why that was the case. And that's what led me into the change space, right? Really trying to understand, what is it about people that causes them to adopt something, to champion it versus comply and then fall off. So I'm here to share what we're doing at Manulife. I've been here for 4 years, but we actually started this Center of Excellence last May. And by that, I mean May of 2025. There was a good 6 months of planning before that, but really the genesis of it is that the organization understood that with the advent of AI coming, that we really needed to build something that could really help all colleagues and all personas understand and own their role in change. How could we support them to be their best through change? And that was late 2023 with our HR communications group. And as thinking of the strategy to support the organization, then in 2024, they started to do a current state assessment of what we had at Manulife John Hancock. That led them to me and my little IT worlds off to the side where I had joined, and ultimately started to help them build the plan for the plan. We signed off on that plan for the plan towards the end of 2024 on my birthday, no less, October 23rd, 2024, and started to build this Center of Excellence. As I said, launched it last May, and now we're fully running, doing what we can to support all of our lines of business and our functional groups be their best to change. So when we think about how we're specifically doing it at Manulife, you'll notice the road and the car on the side of the slide. It really is a journey. Right? You can't flip a switch and have all of a sudden all personas across the organization feel supported, feel they have the competencies and skills and the tools to be their best at change. So we took this type of approach, and as I unpack these 6 areas of focus, I'll go through each one of them in detail, and we'll take a deeper look at that. And of course, again, I want to leave as much time as I can for questions. So Julie, keep me honest. If we hit the 1:40 Eastern Daylight Savings Time, and I'm still yapping, please feel free to tell me to speed up so we can have some time for questions. So how we're doing at Manulife, really 6 different approaches that we've taken, 6 different pillars to our strategy. The first is reframing managing consequences, as we say, into enabling people and shaping choices. So again, I'll expand on all of these particular areas as we go through the hour. The second is we had to make a choice between organizational maturity and project delivery. We also looked at a decentralized model versus centralized, and based on the title of this webinar, you can tell which one we went with. And we really wanted to make sure that it was business led, driven by business outcomes, but also what was the ROI? Could we truly prove from a data perspective that the business or functional group and the leadership team would get the ROI they are hoping for by investing in the change resources that we were offering, or again, helping them build their own? We really wanted to focus on competencies and skills versus tools and templates. We have the saying, friendships over frameworks. And last but not least, a strong community and follow through versus silos. So let's unpack some of these particular areas. Let's look at the first one, reframing the term, the legacy term of organizational change management. That's what we all grew up with. That's what we all heard. We're standing on the shoulders of giants who really started to get this off as a discipline in the last 25 or so years. We wanted to reframe that from the perspective of managing consequences to enabling people and shaping choices. Raise your hand in the chat, give me a reaction, whatever it is, how many times you've been called in to work on a change, and really you've been called in like 4 weeks before launch, and they want you to now manage the change, and really they want you to communicate the change, but they want you just to roll it out, and you're sitting there looking at what they've given you, and you're like, oh no, this is not going to go well. This is going to create challenges. Darn, I wish they had invited me to the table when they first started thinking about making the choices they were making. I really could have helped inform them in the conception stage that, they could have gone a slightly different direction to really embed the people side into the process and technology side of people, process, and technology. So we started there. We said, we're not going to call this organizational change management, OCM. We don't want to manage the poor consequences of bad choices made by people who don't have that people lens on it. We really want to make sure that we are enabling success, right? So we put our flag in the sand for that right off the top. Second of all, we took a look then at organizational maturity versus project delivery, because if you are now thinking about enabling choices right off the bat, you're moving away from just having change as a wing of project management. So we didn't want to just focus on project delivery because, again, we didn't feel that was really going to move the needle in terms of creating a change adaptive organization. And that was really important to us. How could we ensure that we had sustainable, transformational organizational maturity across the whole organization? I do have a question for you, though. Can you do me a favor? Because I don't want you to fall asleep while you're listening to me talk. We focused a lot to get that organizational maturity. We focused a lot on different personas across the organization, which I'll talk a bit more. But I'm really interested for the people that we have here in the group. Which of the following change personas best describe your leadership style when navigating change and transformation? Are you the strategist? Are you the empath? Are you the analyst? Are you the activator? Or are you the skeptic? Or are you my favorite schizophrenic kind and you think you're 1, 2, 3, or 4, or all of these combined? So drop it in the chat. And Julie, if you could do me the favor of checking what people are dropping in the chat and let me know what people are saying and why, especially, please, if you get a chance, if you haven't already done it, drop in who you are and why you think you're that way. Julie,
What
what are people saying?
Well, we have a lot of schizophrenics, it looks like. So we've got a couple of people who find themselves as a combo strategist and analyst, an activator, skeptic, strategist, and empath someone. Dana says, we're in the midst of trying to mature our CM capability beyond project delivery only. Then empath, activator, somebody saying strategist and skeptic. All of the above based on situational leadership from Jackie. So yeah, we have quite a few people who find themselves as a blend. And then do we have anybody with oh, somebody saying empath and strategist work best when done hand in hand. That's what they would argue. And
Okay.
then yeah, a lot of people depend on the audience and situation, but primarily a strategist.
All right, thank you very much. Know thyself is one important part of change leadership, right? What is your style, and how is your style going to impact those relationships that you build with others is a key important part of change leadership. Okay, so we talked about organizational maturity versus project delivery. It was great to hear someone in the chat thinking about moving away from just project delivery. So what did we sort of plant our flag in the sand as when we think about organizational maturity? This is our vision and mission statement, right? Which is that we want to be a change adaptive organization, proactively delivering meaningful, people focused outcomes that drive our business forward, right? If it doesn't have that last bit, why are we here, right? How do we do that, right? We're empowering colleagues by providing resources, support, and community to accelerate a mindset that thrives through change happening every day and to effectively roll out and sustain impactful transformation across our organization. One of the things that we've glommed onto the most in this, that's carried forward the most, is talking about a change adaptive organization, right? If you're out there now and you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, we need to start up a center of excellence, we need to start figuring out what does the foundation of that look like. We went through this as well, where we thought, okay, change, change ready, change resilience, change adaptive, right? We landed on change adaptive because we felt like that was like a shark. Everybody knows, well, like a shark, they seemingly never sleep, they just keep moving, right? That adaptability quotient that we could talk to, we felt was the most important because we felt change ready almost sounds like you're sitting there waiting for something to happen to you as it comes at you. And as Nellie, the head of Tiger Hall, would say, right, we've moved into a CAU world, a change as usual world, versus waiting for something to happen. And then change resilience sounded a bit too much like the Odyssey, and hanging on the beach for 10 years and storming the walls of Troy. We didn't want to seem like we're going to war and this is combative and we're getting all the spears in me, like Matt Damon had the spears in him by the end. So, oh, geez, if you haven't seen the Odyssey, wow, it's been around for 10,000 years, hasn't it? Are really spoilers a big deal at this point? Anyway, this is what we wanted to start with. We wanted to really build a change adaptive organization where everybody understood and owned their role in change. And so from that perspective, we took a look again when we think about decentralized versus centralized. We wanted to take a excuse me, a persona-based approach to change. We wanted to look at all the personas in the organization and really decide what did they need to be their best at that CAU practice as change as usual, right? And that really made us think about, okay, if we did that, then what is our goal here? Is our goal to build a bloated, expensive army of change practitioners that are centralized under me who would really take away everybody's ownership in their role in change? Was that going to move the needle? Right? Are we just a McKinsey or somebody that you could outsource your role in change? Hey, Blake, I'm in our GWAM business and we need help on this one initiative. Can you do it? And yeah, you could build that model, right? And we still want to help and empower and enable, our peers in the business for sure, but we want to set them up for long-term success. We want to make sure that we give them the tools that they need to be successful so they can continue to iterate and evolve on that, and they don't have to sit in some queue waiting for Blake to get to them. We wanted to make sure that they have the skills and the tools that they need to drive change and transformation through their own business and functional group. So we started down this road of taking a look at what that would look like. And one of the big areas that we landed on was the idea of, because we made that choice from a decentralization standpoint, we really need this to be business led. We really need to make sure that the business owns this and that it is driven from a data perspective as well, right? We did not want to come in as the change police and say, with our two tablets from on high and say, thou shalt do it this way, right? Every business has their nuance, their thing that they're working towards, right? So what global type of best practices could we give them? And then what would work well for the nuances in their organizations? Manulife is also a global organization, right? So we have businesses across all different Asia markets as well, right? And there are local nuances to each of those markets, just as we have here in Canada and the US. And again, one approach doesn't fit all from whatever those local nuances need related to, the global best practices. So what we came up with then to ensure that the business could measure their maturity and their growth in change was this 5-point scale, right? We did a lot of research throughout the organizations that exist around the world in change. We looked at what Tiger Hall had, because I remember Nellie coming on and doing a presentation around her model as well. And we built this 5-point scale, which again, if you're in risk or architecture, no one questions you that you would have this. And how do you tie the return on investments to moving up these levels, and what do you need to do to be successful? That's really our goal, right? What we did was we started to connect with the strategy and transformation teams in each of the lines of business and the functional groups, because they have a really wide perspective on what's going on in the business. And we would also partner, because my group is within we now call them our people and communications team, but formerly HR and communications. So I would go as the change partner. I would bring the HR partner, the people partner with me, and the communications partner. We would go to the strategy and transformation teams and say, hey, what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve in 2026 and beyond? What do you think the people gaps are going to look like, and how can we help you accelerate to those outcomes? And one of the first questions that we got as we were doing all the prep for launching the Center of Excellence was like, well, prove it. Like, is this real? Is this a thing? Am I going to get the ROI? How can you measure that? So very, very quickly, we moved towards being able to show industry examples where actual data could be tied to success. So I won't drain the whole slide that you see here, but we had this slide sort of last in the presentation, and then I was sitting in front of the COO of Asia, and very quickly I moved this up to the first slide, the bottom part of it, because we hadn't built the model yet, to ensure that we were talking to executives in their language, which is really about what percentage of your success is going to come from people understanding and adopting the new ways of working, and what are the risks if you don't have that. And the answer was always pretty much 100%. All right, so what we did was, in creating this maturity model, we really wanted to then take people through assessments around where they stand now in their business or functional group. What do they need to do to move up this to gain that ROI? And I think one of the most interesting parts of when we think of data driven and what that looks like, this is the nut we're trying to crack. Hopefully we've made a dent in it, but what we're really focused on is, how do you measure the change experience and change maturity in real time, right? This is something I think most people are obsessed with. Sometimes senior leaders will see change resourcing as I think Nellie said on the latest podcast they did, talking about why North American plans sometimes fall flat in Asia. They sometimes look at it as overhead versus infrastructure. How do we get them to a place where we can lead them to feel like and to know that they're getting the return on investment? So what we've started out with here is this, not only the 5-point scale, but also how we're measuring that. And what we look at is, first, foundationally speaking, right? My previous boss at RBC said, you come over to Manulife with me, and you can help lead this work at the vanguard to formalize it for the organization. So we started at the foundational level, right? Does the business or the functional group have any type of people who have it as either their role or the primary part of their role to help deliver on change and transformation? If they do that, that's great. But again, remember, our goal was to ensure that all of the personas that you saw had the skills and tools they needed to be successful. So again, we developed an L&D program, an upskilling program, to ensure that they did. And then where were we from a senior leadership alignment perspective? So once you have what we call that change infrastructure in place, right, then we focus on delivery. Right. Okay. So now that you've got that change infrastructure, what are you doing with it? Right. Do you have change plans for your top initiatives? So when we worked with this strategy and transformation teams within the lines of business and functional groups, we would say, okay, tell us what your top 5 initiatives are, and we'll work with you to help you develop change plans, get them in place, make sure you have adoption metrics, being actively tracked, and that you're demonstrating that organizational maturity, all the while making sure that they have people who are coming along on that journey so they can replicate that as they go onwards with what they're doing. Because again, me and my team as a decentralized model don't have all the capacity to sit there and help them with every single initiative across an organization that has 37,000 employees and tons of markets across the world. And once we've figured that, okay, they're in a great place from they've got change plans, they've got adoption metrics being tracked, they're demonstrating that org maturity, let's make sure that we're really focused on the customer, colleague, employee experience. We're talking here about internal customers for our sake, right? How do we make sure that they have the degree of awareness that they have in real time? How do we ensure that they are ready with the knowledge and the ability to do what they need to do? And how do we know that once something is then gone live, how do we know that the adoption and the ongoing sustainment is actually happening, right? So this is a big part of what we're focused on, and we're continuing to build out the model. I say we've dented the nut because we're testing and piloting a lot of different things within the organization to make sure that that's happening. And we put this at 50% because we truly believe that the customer who we're supporting, this is the heart of what we do as change practitioners, right? As empaths, to ensure that we're setting the people up for success. Because more and more, as I'm sure you're all becoming aware, right? People leaders, we don't need them to be task managers anymore, right? We can get AI agents to meet with the direct reports and say, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? What are our roles as people leaders now going forward? It really should be to set the vision for the team, to put the right people in the right place for success, to remove barriers, to make sure we're celebrating our team members, that we're making sure that we're developing them their level of ownership they have in their own career development and supporting that. So we really wanted to make sure that the people focus is strong here when we think about how we're measuring the change experience and maturity overall. I'd love to hear more about this from people who are listening right now, what you're doing to measure change in real time. This really came as a genesis from the idea that I would sit on projects who would do a lessons learned after 2 years. And they said, oh, yeah, if only we had known at, say, the end of phase 1, at the 3-month mark, if only we'd known that people didn't really understand why we were doing this or how their daily work connects to the overall vision and mission. If only we'd known that and put up a red flag, we could have done something to mitigate that risk. And we could have turned this 2-year journey where the adoption still was, and we kind of blew the trust of the organization. If we'd known that at that time in real time, we could have grappled with that, got ahead of it before we went down to the readiness phase where people are like, okay, I'm listening, but I'm really complying. And sure, yeah, just tell me what you need me to do, et cetera, et cetera. So we really wanted to make sure that we identify key issues that might pop up in real time as we go through that. So again, we could get a better outcomes, we could get to those better outcomes faster, and we would leave behind a better culture so that people would continue to engage and feel like they're a part of the process going forward. So one of the things that one of the areas that I mentioned was around competencies and skills versus tools and templates. Most of you are probably change practitioners or have been to some points in your careers. And remember the old days when you just had all these, Excel files and Word documents, and you'd go into a room and you'd have that all on the table, and the leadership would just look at you like, oh my God, what is this? Or God forbid you were the type of person who just lobbed that over the fence via email to the sponsor or to the project team and said, hey, can you fill all this out in terms of who your audiences are, et cetera, et cetera. And that was terrible, right? I remember we had a leader who came in at like 2014 into RBC and said, we're going to do all that below the waterline. And I want you all to focus on building the competencies and skills you need to have great change conversations, right? Go out there, build the relationships, get into the rooms before the rooms, the meetings before the meetings, be an influencer, be an evangelist for what they really need, what their hopes, fears, and dreams are, because Lord knows they don't need to see a whole bunch of templates and tools. Just have those conversations, get those outputs, get it into the what you need to do to build a great change plan or whatever your strategy or tactical plan you're looking to do, and present them with the outcomes versus flooding them with all these Excel files and Word docs. And I'm sure AI will provide it all now in some portal that will pretend it's easier. But ultimately, great change leadership comes from building those relationships, friendships over frameworks like we talked about, and helping people accelerate to the outcomes they need to get to without all this busy work that for us as change practitioners should sit below the waterline. So from a center of excellence set of deliverables, this is what we set out to do. We set out to create uh, change strategies and a delivery playbook that, again, people could leverage to drive sustainable, ongoing, impactful transformation. But again, getting back to the idea that this wasn't all about project delivery, right? We wanted to ensure that each persona, whether it was our people and comms partners, whether it was our project managers, whether it was our executive leaders, what did they need to be their best at, going through change and making that happen for people? We built up an entire L&D set of pathways to make that happen. But again, we didn't want to just, train them up and then dump them on the side of the road, right? That's how my change training went way back in the day. I think back in 2017. I was up here in Orangeville, Ontario for 3 days, stuffed in a room with a whole bunch of other people. And we got downloaded so many templates. And then all of a sudden, the 3 days were over. And we're sitting on the side of the road going, oh my God, if I don't use all of this tomorrow, it's going to drain right out of me. And, a lot of it did drain right out of me. So we wanted to make sure that the skills that we were doing through those L&D pathways were sustainable, that people were continuing to learn and grow. And how could we do that? Supporting them, not owning it for them, but supporting them through that particular journey. And then as we talked before about, measuring success, how do we know that we're getting successful outcomes out of this? One of the things when we talked about the idea of how do you get that change adaptive culture going into the organization, how do you ensure that the whole organization has that always on change adaptive mindset as a core role skill set embedded in our DNA? One of the first conversations we had with a lot of the people within Manulife was the idea that change begins at conception, right? We have to get rid of the change management notion of the first job as us as a change practitioner is to create awareness, right? If I'm given something that stinks and I'm told I have to go create awareness and desire with that, oh, that's a terrible job. I don't want that job, right? I want to be sitting at the table, showing the value that I can offer by ensuring that all the people understand that the success of what's going to happen is based on the success of how we help our people through these changes that they're constantly now on a roller coaster being put through. So we really tried to get in there with the lines of business and the functional groups and say, hey, if you invite us to the table up front, we can prove our value by showing that if we outline the vision and define success from a change perspective, if we know the impact and the readiness, and we've got an executive sponsor who can lead through change, that investment of time that you put up front in that stage will pay off dramatically down the road. And that also talks to our second stage, which you talked about, again, was the construction, right? Who are the stakeholders? How can we make sure that we understand the impact to each stakeholder? What are their hopes, fears, and dreams? The what's in it for them? And could we build all that out before we get talking about even delivery, right? A lot of people think, especially where I came from on the IT side, right? The delivery phase begins with go live, whereas we say the opposite, right? We are making sure people have the knowledge and the ability to perform the change before we click go live and get to the reinforcement stage, right? So this is what this is what we're trying to embed as a framework within Manulife, to that understanding that they need to think about the people side of change the minute leadership, anybody, whoever it is, because we don't just restrict everything from an ideation standpoint to senior leadership. Do they automatically think of, okay, there's a reason why they call it people, process, and technology, right? It's not just great alliteration or alphabetical order, but people will be the foundation, especially as we move forward. So again, we came up with a whole bunch of service offerings for the group. again, one of the challenges, but one of the things that I think has really helped us continue to evolve and be successful is that the CEO did not come out and say, Blake has got all the answers, because Blake doesn't. And therefore, you're going to just do whatever Blake tells you to do from a change perspective. No, we were in, again, our people comms group, and we had to go out and engage with the businesses and with the functional groups and say, hey, again, what are you trying to achieve in 2026 or beyond? What do you think are the gaps and obstacles from a people perspective? And how can we, with our suite of service offerings, accelerate the outcomes you're trying to achieve, right? Part of this was the upskilling offerings that you're looking at here across the different personas. We did some e-learnings for team leads and individual contributors because you can't hold sessions with 30,000 people. And this was part of our service offerings from an upskilling perspective. And again, that made sure we were very clearly defining what the value proposition was for us as a group, but for each of those service offerings. So we do a 3 half-day foundations of leading change and transformation. And when I say leading, I mean delivering on that. So if you're a transformation lead or a project manager, um, we bring them in to do 3 half-day sessions, right, to go through the framework that you saw and help them build those competencies and skills to have those great change conversations with the tools that they need to make sure that they can track that and move it forward. But ultimately, we then don't just say, okay, you're done. We're going to make sure that we have all sorts of different community events afterwards for the alumni that go through the various upskilling opportunities we have, so that again, the skills can keep getting refreshed, but also that we as a Center of Excellence can hear back from the people who are out there doing this to say, Blake, that didn't work. Can we update this or this word? But if you added this in, it would be better. Again, we often talk about that it's a menu and not a recipe. And again, not being the change police, we want to hear what's better so that we can continue to evolve the service offerings that we have. If I was going to say, if somebody said to me, Blake, what would be the one thing, if you look back when you started this journey to now, what would be the one thing you would do different or change? And I again point back to the idea that the easier path would have been, thou shalt do it from the CEO, whatever Blake says. But there's no way we would have evolved the offerings that we have to date had we not had to prove the value proposition that we had, right? And that's still an ongoing journey. There's a massive amount of lines of business and functional groups across the globe. We're still moving through that and helping them build change adaptivity within their organization. And it's really interesting to see what does work. And some of it's like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't think that would have the same type of impact. One of those things when we talk about, again, the conception stage of change is this notion whenever we host, Director Plus or AVP Plus sessions, the cameras come out at various times to take pictures. And this is one of those ones that come out because we say that if you can't answer these 5 questions, you shouldn't be going out and talking about change at all. Don't waste your colleague, your employees' times, right? If you can't tell them why this change is necessary, why this change is happening now, what's wrong with how we do it today, what will happen if we don't change, and hey, what's in it for me? Like, how does this going to improve my life? Right? Don't even waste time going out there. But so many times, what you see is the opposite of what we call the change leadership life cycle, right? Which is how often do we clearly establish what the North Star is for the change to whatever degree we know, right? And we can be transparent. AI is a perfect example. Who knows what 3 months from now something is going to happen? Some new product, some update to a current product is going to have that's going to alter that North Star to some degree. But here's what we know today. Here's what we don't know today. Here's why we need to do what we're doing, communicating the need for the change, right? And one of the things that we've seen as a big difference maker is not just dictating from down on high and saying, do it this way, there's no flexibility. Instead, quite the opposite. We found more and more that, it's not just supporting people's emotions through change that is being a needle mover. It's really about what about the systems that we create for them? And how does that help them accelerate through change, right? So we spent a lot more time with the idea of how can we bring the people who really know what's happening on the ground into the process to co-create the change with us. And what we've seen is that really instills a sense of ownership too. Like if I'm given the opportunity to say, yeah, thank God you involved me because I'm telling you now this won't work or this will work better if you do it this way, right? Then I feel like I'm a business owner now. You're treating me like a business owner, right? You're coming to me and saying, I trust you, I trust your skills, we brought you in here for this purpose, and people run with it. If they feel like they have a sense of ownership, they really run with it. And then we have to make sure as people leaders, right, that we create those trusted spaces and those 360 feedback loops to ensure that buy-in is consistent. Okay? So when we go out and talk to our colleague base, we also try to talk about change characteristics, right? That's the last point when we talk about strong community and follow through versus silos, right? We don't want to think that this is all about a framework or an Excel file. Really, how can we ensure that people have change adaptive characteristics built into their DNA? And we did go through a process of like, how many of these can you put out there before you just confuse the heck out of people? I'd rather have somebody adapt one thing and do that well versus giving them 10 things and they fail at everything. So along with these adaptive characteristics, we really focused on, okay, what are practical tools that could help embed those characteristics in there? So we created 2 tools for each of those 4 characteristics that, again, from a self-paced e-learning perspective or through some of our instructor-led sessions, right, we could really hammer home on, because a lot of our e-learnings that existed were from like 2019, like pre-pandemic, and it really just sort of focused on the high level psychological side, which is change is tough, change is hard. We wanted to give people practical skills, tools, so that they could become more change adaptive, because this is another one of those slides that come out, and this many people know the bridges model, right? But the one thing we've talked about here a lot is that, and that people take away and they tell us, what's one thing, when we say, what's one thing you're going to do different today than what you were doing before? A lot of them walk away and say, I didn't really think about the idea that change begins with an ending as opposed to a beginning. People are having to unlearn to unlock what's next, and they're going to go through a whole bunch of different feelings and behaviors. And as a leader, I have to understand that my people are on this curve at different points at different times. Everybody, comes from all sorts of different places, backgrounds, etc., right? And I can't just assume that they're all in one place at one time and build a strategy to support them through that. So again, I think as we really wrap up here and get on to questions, right? This is what we're really about. We really go out to our organization and say, hey, lines of business, hey, functional groups, right? How can we help based on the service offerings we have? What do you need from us to accelerate the outcomes you're trying to achieve? How can we partner to make that happen? Here's the summary of that. We want to make sure that you're maturing so you can continue to carry on with that. We've helped a lot of the lines of business and functional groups bring their own change people on board. Once they realize, ooh, this is actually valuable and we really need to do this, we work with our recruiting partners, our talent acquisition partners. We work with them to help bring people on board, co-interviewing with people in the business to ensure that an applicant's not just chat GPTing what it's like to be a change practitioner. And then once they come in, we help them into our whatever upskilling we think is going to work best for them, and then bring them into our community to continue that ongoing development. So that's a lot of me talking for 41 minutes and 33 seconds. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I would love people to drop in the chats. And Julie, I don't even know if we have the ability in the webinar here. I should have asked. I apologize. Can people come off mute and talk about one idea from today that you'll implement tomorrow? If not, drop it in the chat. If you have any questions, Julie's going to feed them to me and I'll do my best to answer them. So I'm going to stop sharing right now.
Yeah, we do have the possibility if somebody wanted to answer that very last question, just indicate, go to the bottom of your screen, hit react, and then raise hand, and then I can let you speak and respond to Blake. But yeah, I can definitely start us off on the Q&A until I see somebody who would like to speak. We have our first question from Charlotte. How do you define a change adaptive organization? We spent a lot of time in my previous organization defining it.
How do you define a change adaptive organization? I think it goes back to, and great question. I think it goes back to, and again, I want to maybe some clarity around when you say define a change adaptive organization. Does that mean you're coming in and you're looking at organization and you're saying, oh, they are change adaptive to whatever degree based on X, Y, and Z, right? I'm going to take it from the perspective that we built that 5-point maturity model scale to be able to help people understand where they are now based on certain criterias within each of those phases to say, do you do this? Do you have that? And if you don't, well, how can we help you accelerate through that particular model? So again, a change adaptive organization, I think if I want to success myself out of a job is basically what my end goal is. I want Manulife, John Hancock, to be the most change adaptive organization it can be to achieve those business outcomes. So I think it was what I was saying there. I think in what does success look like? That that change, that always on culture, right? Where I don't ever go into a room and people are saying, hey, we got this great idea for this. And I don't want them to ever say, so let's just go build this, widget and we're going to build an MVP in like 4 weeks and then we'll just keep iterating and figuring it out. To me, a change adaptive organization is one that says, what do our people need to support and deliver for our customers? And how can we make sure that we support them through that journey? And that can include, building the best widget and doing all wrapping the processes around it. I hope that answers the question. And if not, feel free to elaborate further.
Awesome. We'll see if Charlotte responds. So next question we do have is from Melissa. Did you have a sense of how engaged your workforce was in general before embarking on this journey? How did that level of engagement either help or hinder the success of change adaptability? Or did employee engagement increase as employees became change adaptable?
Great question. Do you see this gray hair, these streaks of gray hair? They didn't exist 2 years ago. I'm being facetious, but I'll say a couple things. Number one is that when I really started this journey dealing with the lines of business and the customers, it was literally about a month from now, almost 2 years ago, where I was seconded to build the plan for the plan. And then, as I mentioned, I brought that plan to our head of people comms at the time on my birthday in late October, right? The first thing I did was build a coalition of people within those different personas that you saw, right? I didn't say, oh, I got the answers. I got it all figured out. We built this change enablement advisory committee where we drew on people from all over the world, from all sorts of different roles. And we said, you all know the organization better than Blake knows it. What do we need to be successful in that? And that really helped inform and start to build consensus. So if anybody's thinking of going down this road, start there. And the second thing I'll say is that once we started some additional outreach, I was actually, or even better, when people got just a whiff of this, right? I was actually pleasantly surprised that business leaders understood that the tsunami of change that AI and everything else could bring, because now we're talking like late 2024, they were like, ugh, we've seen enough of this fail without a focus on the people side of this, and we predict that it's going to fail even worse if we don't get ahead of this. So I was surprised and pleased that that was the case. And then it came down to really proving the value proposition. And we're still in that journey. We're still in that journey. We're still ensuring that people are coming in. And the one thing I'll say is that we never went initially into spaces where people didn't want us or didn't see value, right? That's really tough, right? Just, oh, we're just going to tick the box on every line of business and go in there and sell our wares, et cetera, right? We didn't have the capacity to do that. If people wanted us to come in because they thought it would add value, that's where we went first, and that's a great piece of advice for anybody listening.
Awesome. Sherwood asks, Manulife's 5 levels look a lot like the 5 levels of the capability maturity model integration, the CMMI. Is there a significant difference?
I would have to see it. Who asked that question? Sorry, was it Sherwood?
Yeah, Sherwood.
Sherwood, do me a favor. Follow me on LinkedIn, Blake Bell, the Manulife version. And I want to talk more about the capability maturity model integration, the CMMI. You'll have to forgive me. I don't know that off the top of my head, off the top of my heart. We're so embedded into ours. And one of my team members was the initial lead who went out and did all the research across to see what's working, best practice in the industry. So sure would I never overpromise and underdeliver. So I don't have a great answer to your question.
Awesome. And then one last question from Alexandros. If other people have questions, feel free to add them into the chat. Alexandra asks, how do we manage to answer the question, will my investment in change management pay up and how? Supported with tangible data logic.
Yeah, great. That is the fundamental question, Alexandros. I think I mentioned Nellie's webinar the other day, which is that some leaders still see this as overhead versus infrastructure, right? I think two pathways that we did this to help that out, right? Number one was external data. What was out there now that was provable? Because even when I presented to our people comms group the first time back in like June of 2024, one of the first questions they asked was, is this real? Does this actually happen in the other organizations out in the world? And how can we prove that? And again, that led us to more of what does McKinsey say about change? Because what are all the different organizations say that what does success looks like? How do you prove it? How has that happened? And this is what we continue to drive towards, to take that down to another level, to really get down there and prove that. And putting that up on the table right up front to say, you know, you can pay for this later in really terrible, horrible, long-term ways, or you can pay for this up front. And we do a much better job, I would say now, about very tangibly saying, this is codifying how the support, how much time the support is going to take, right? We now have come to the idea that let's help people get down to their first change plan and then launch them on their way to be successful, right? And we do these change accelerator workshops where we lock ourselves in a room with key members of the project team and help them get down to that level. But in advance of that, we now can codify it's going to take X amount of time based on the number of audiences that you have to get us to a really good stakeholder analysis. It's going to take X amount of time to do this whole change plan stuff. So they definitely know up front, like this is what they're getting into. And again, the other thing on the other parallel track, right, is we do a lot of effort in terms of capturing the wins and then having other people evangelize for this. We never push ourselves on anybody. I got too much work to do right now with all the polls that we're getting because people are hearing about the success and the value that it's provided. So that's what we really focus on, right? We wait for the polls, right? And that's based on the fact that people are saying that, hey, this is accelerating the outcomes we're looking to get from a better product, service, or process. And again, it's also from an efficiency standpoint, accelerating that. And the culture we're leaving behind is a more engaged, adaptive culture. So that's what we really focus on is get the wins, have them evangelize. Don't make it about us. Don't make it about a commercial for us. We do help, craft success stories, but it's really about by engaging that change adaptive culture, it's really going to produce those wins across the board. I hope that answers the question, Alexandros.
Awesome. And we have one more question from Heather. How would you recommend starting on this journey if people in your organization are already drowning in changes?
Yeah, they were already drowning in changes when we did this. One of the interesting things that we did just earlier this year with one of our functional groups that sort of branched off from another group to be their own group, right? Is that we helped again back to that the North Star and the co-creation, thinking about systems of change, right? We helped that group develop their North Star, and then we help them build their target operating model, not by taking control of it, telling them what to do, but just by creating mechanisms by which they and the champions that they have could do this. But part of that was the commitment to do what we branded as this never stop stopping exercise, right? You might have seen that Andy Samberg movie about the Eurodance competition, right? I have never gone into an organization or a team where I haven't seen a ton of hidden capacity if you give the people a voice and a safe space to tell you that we could stop doing this tomorrow, it would make no impact. We could improve this particular process or product in this way, and then we could automate it, and we would free up all this existing capacity. never been in an organization or been involved with a team that when you as a leader give them a safe space to not feel like they're going to get swatted down or that you're so precious about all that you've built, they'll tell you what we can get rid of to incorporate all of this stuff into infrastructure. And again, I go back to what Nelly said, right? It's not overhead, it's infrastructure. You get people thinking, changing the way they view when they conceive of a change to do these things versus all the other weird things they've done that might have got a widget built in 4 weeks, but no one ended up using it, right? You get that mindset change by getting the wins and then evangelizing about those. I think you'll see a difference.
Awesome. We also have another question from Charlotte. So, are you able to work hand in hand with project or program managers? Do you ask them to become change practitioners within the business? A lot of discussions of this in my previous organization.
Yeah, that's a great question, Charlotte. And that was one of the fundamental questions around, are we going to go decentralized or are we going to go centralized? And Blake will have this bloated army of change practitioners and people asks for, help us with this project and we'll just send them in there and they'll have no idea of, really what the business is all about. So when we think about working with project and program managers, again, we've taken the tack to where, yes, we want to upskill you for you to be the best at your role in driving change, but we also want to make sure that we teach you to fish. So that's where in this year, as opposed to last year when we were building a lot of the foundational work, now when we commit and we get businesses to commit to that upskilling, we do go in and say, okay, practically this is what this looks like on the biggest initiative you're working on now. Let's work with the project team to get you down to that change plan level. We can never commit to then go off and executing on all that. But also in parallel with people are seeing, if this is working for them or if we can show them how we've helped onboard change resources into other parts of the organization, we'll help them build that, unveil that capacity, help them build that in there. Because so many times people will say to me, Blake, this is so important, but we don't have the resources for it. I was like, well, that's an interesting statement because you have 1,000 people in your line of business, and you're telling me the 990th and 1,000th role are going to produce that are sitting there open on your career site. You're telling me that that's going to produce more value than what you just told me is so valuable to the success of what you're doing. Why don't you think about, that capacity organization or the capacity freeing up exercise that we have? And why don't you think about repurposing that which, you just kind of been doing ever since you've had to do it, repurposing that role to come in there and deliver on this more effectively. So, this is why we say the number one thing we focus on is how do we build relationships? How do we have great change conversations? Because we, at the end of the day, we're not change practitioners as much as, even though we're internal to Manulife, we're salespeople, we're marketing people, right? If we can't get people to understand the ROI and the value around change, then we're just going to be stuck in the mud, right?
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's all the questions that we had for today. So I wanted to take a second and thank you all for attending. And also, Blake, thank you so much for presenting. I'm sure a lot of people are going to take a lot of great value out of this presentation. We had a lot of great comments of thank you and going to take a lot out of this presentation. Thanks for a great presentation. Another thank you. So, yeah, appreciate everybody for attending and for joining. And yeah. Thank you, everybody, and hope you have a good day.
Thanks for your time, everybody. Appreciate it.